If we ban you from ever teaching publicly again, will you comply?
I've also answered that previously as well.
Is that how you answer the Kohen Hagadol?
The wait is finally over. The Chosen Season 6 trailer is here, and I have to be completely honest with you. Nothing could have prepared me for what I just watched. Because this is not just another trailer. This is the beginning of the most emotional, the most painful, and the most important season in the entire history of The Chosen. And if you thought Season 5 broke you, Season 6 is going to completely shatter you. The trailer alone left me sitting in silence for a few minutes, just processing everything I had just seen. And today, we are going to break down every single detail of this trailer, talk about the official release date that Dallas Jenkins has finally confirmed, and most importantly, we are going to talk about what this season is really going to feel like when we finally sit down to watch it. So if you are ready, let's get into it. For a very long time, all we had were rumors, behind-the-scenes hints, and small fragments of information that Jonathan Roumie and Dallas Jenkins dropped here and there in interviews. We were holding on to every word, trying to piece together what Season 6 was going to look like, trying to imagine how they were going to bring this part of the story to life. And then, the trailer dropped, and everything changed. The very first thing that hits you when you watch this trailer is the atmosphere. It does not feel like any of the previous trailers. The earlier seasons had moments of hope, moments of joy, moments where you could see the disciples laughing and growing and following Jesus with excitement and wonder. But this trailer is different. From the very first second, there is a weight to it, a heaviness that sits on your chest and does not let go. The colors are darker, the music is quieter in some moments, and then suddenly overwhelming in others. And right at the center of everything, you see Jonathan. And the look in his eyes is something I genuinely did not expect to feel this deeply, just from a trailer. What makes Jonathan's performance already so extraordinary, even in these few minutes of footage, is the silence. We have talked about this before, how Season 6 is going to be a season where Jesus speaks very little, but communicates everything. And you can already see that in the trailer. There are moments where Jonathan is standing completely still, surrounded by chaos, surrounded by people screaming and pointing and accusing, and he just stands there, calm, quiet. And somehow that silence is louder than anything else in the entire trailer. It tells you everything about where Jesus' mind is. It tells you that he knows exactly what is coming. It tells you that he has already made peace with it. And watching that, knowing what we know, knowing what is about to happen to him, is one of the hardest things to sit with. The trailer opens with what appears to be the Garden of Gethsemane, and even in these brief seconds, you can feel the isolation of that moment. Jesus is alone. The disciples are somewhere in the background, unable to fully understand the gravity of what is about to happen. And you see Jesus in what looks like the deepest, most painful prayer of his life. This is the moment where he says, "Not my will, but yours be done." And the weight of those words, the weight of that surrender, is something that the trailer captures in a way that genuinely made me emotional. Because this is not just a religious moment, this is a human moment. This is a person who knows exactly what is coming, who feels the full weight of it, and who chooses to go through it anyway. And Jonathan carries all of that in his expression without saying a single word. And then, everything shifts. The calm of the garden disappears, and suddenly, the trailer moves fast. Torches in the darkness, soldiers, voices, confusion, and you realize that the arrest has begun. This is the moment that Season 5 was building toward, and now we are finally going to see it fully unfold. Judas in the background, the disciples panicking, and Jesus in the middle of all of it, completely still, completely present, completely surrendered. And that contrast, between the chaos happening all around him and the stillness he carries inside himself, is already telling us that this season is going to be unlike anything we have ever watched on screen before. What the trailer also does incredibly well is it does not try to give you everything. It is not one of those trailers that shows you the entire story from beginning to end. Instead, it gives you feelings. It gives you fragments. A look here, a moment there, a line of dialogue that hits you before you even fully process it. And that is exactly the right way to approach a season like this. Because this season is not about plot twists or surprises. We all know what happens. We have known the story our entire lives, but what we do not know, what we cannot fully prepare for, is how it is going to feel to watch Jonathan go through it. And this trailer is the first time we are starting to understand just how deeply this season is going to affect all of us. Dallas Jenkins has spoken about this season with a kind of reverence that he has not used for any of the previous seasons. He has said that this is the season the entire show has been building toward. Every single character arc, every single relationship, every single moment of growth and struggle and faith that we have watched over the past 5 seasons, it all leads here. And watching this trailer, you can feel that. You can feel the weight of everything that came before pressing down on every single frame. You can feel how much this moment means not just to the story, but to everyone who made it. And that is what makes this trailer so different from anything else. It does not just make you excited, it makes you feel something much deeper than excitement. It makes you feel the kind of anticipation that is almost mixed with grief, because you know that what is coming is beautiful and devastating at the same time, and you cannot wait to watch it, and you are also terrified to watch it. And somehow both of those things are true at exactly the same time. Now let's talk about the specific moments in this trailer that stopped me completely and made me go back and watch again and again. Because there is so much happening in every single frame of this trailer that if you only watched it once, I promise you that you miss things. And I want to make sure that we go through all of it together because every single detail matters in a season like this. Every look, every setting, every brief moment of dialogue, it all means something. And when you understand what you are looking at, the trailer becomes even more powerful than it already is. The first moment I want to talk about is the scene where Jesus is brought before Annas. Now, for those of you who may not be as familiar with this part of the story, Annas was the former high priest. He was no longer officially in that position by this point, but he was still one of the most powerful and influential figures behind everything that was happening. And the trailer gives us a glimpse of this interrogation that honestly sent chills through me. Because what you see is not a formal trial. What you see is something much more personal and much more calculated than that. Annas is not standing in front of a crowd. He is not performing for anyone. He is sitting across from Jesus in what feels like a quiet, private moment. And yet, the tension in that room is absolutely suffocating. And then you hear it. You hear Jesus' voice. Calm, clear, completely unafraid. And he says something that cuts right through everything. He has been teaching openly, in public, for everyone to see and hear. He has never hidden anything. So why is he being questioned as if he were some kind of criminal hiding in the shadows? And the way Jonathan delivers that line, even in the few seconds we get in the trailer, is extraordinary. Because it is not defiant in an aggressive way. It is not angry. It is simply truthful. And that truth, spoken so calmly in the middle of so much corruption and manipulation, is somehow one of the most powerful things in the entire trailer. And of course, as we know from the story, that answer is what leads to Jesus being struck by one of the guards. And that moment, that first act of physical violence against him, is where the suffering truly and officially begins. The next moment I cannot stop thinking about is the brief glimpse we get of the Sanhedrin trial before Caiaphas. And what the trailer captures so brilliantly about this scene is the absurdity of it. There are witnesses being brought forward, one after another, and none of their testimonies match. None of them agree. It is chaotic and disorganized, and it should be falling apart completely. And yet somehow, despite all of that, you already know watching this that the outcome has been decided. That no matter what anyone says, no matter how contradictory the evidence is, the conclusion was reached long before this trial ever began. And watching Jesus stand in the middle of that chaos, watching him observe all of it with that quiet understanding in his eyes, is one of the most haunting things the trailer gives us. And then comes the moment that I think is going to be one of the defining scenes of the entire season. Caiaphas, clearly overwhelmed and frustrated by the chaos of the trial, silences everyone and turns directly to Jesus. And he asks him the question, "Are you the Messiah?" And what the trailer shows us, even just in a fraction of a second, is the weight of that moment. Because this is not just a legal question. This is not just a question about guilt or innocence in the eyes of the law. This is the question, the one that everything else has been circling around. And Jesus answers it. And even the brief glimpse we get of Jonathan in that moment, the steadiness in his eyes, the complete and total lack of fear, tells you everything about who Jesus is, and what he knows, and what he has accepted. That moment alone is worth the entire wait for this season. What I also want to point out about the trailer is the way it handles the disciples, because it would have been very easy to make this trailer entirely about Jesus and his journey through these trials, and I completely would have understood that. But the trailer also gives us moments with the disciples, and those moments are absolutely heartbreaking in their own way. Because you see them watching, you see them trying to process what is happening, you see the confusion and the fear and the grief on their faces, and it reminds you that this story is not only happening to Jesus, it is happening to everyone who loves him. And watching people who have given up everything to follow this man, now standing completely helpless as they watch him be dragged from place to place, that is a different kind of pain, and the trailer makes you feel it. Peter in particular stands out in the trailer in a way that I was not fully prepared for. We already know what Peter is going to do. We already know that in the middle of all of this, in one of the darkest and most chaotic nights of his life, Peter is going to deny knowing Jesus 3 times. And there is a moment in the trailer where you see Peter's face and you can already see the conflict beginning to build inside him. You can see the fear. You can see a man who loves Jesus with everything he has, but who is also terrified in a way he has never been terrified before. And if you have been watching The Chosen from the beginning, if you have watched Peter's journey from a struggling fisherman to one of Jesus' closest followers, then that moment in the trailer is going to hit you in a way that is very difficult to describe. Because you know what is coming, and you almost want to look away, but you cannot. The trailer also gives us the first glimpse of Pontius Pilate, and the way he is being portrayed this season is something I find incredibly fascinating. Because Pilate is one of the most complex figures in this entire story, he is not a villain in the traditional sense. He is a man caught between what he knows is right and the pressure of everything around him. And in the brief moment we get with him in the trailer, you can already see that internal conflict written all over his face. He is looking at Jesus, and you can see that he does not understand why this man is standing in front of him. He does not understand what the threat is, and yet the weight of his position, the weight of the expectations placed on him, is already beginning to close in around him. And that tension between his instinct toward justice and the pressure toward compromise is going to be one of the most compelling threads of the entire season. And finally, I want to talk about the music in this trailer, because whoever is responsible for the score of this season deserves an enormous amount of credit. The music in this trailer is doing something that is genuinely rare and genuinely impressive. It is not just setting a mood. It is not just creating atmosphere. It is telling a story of its own. There are moments where the music is so quiet and so still that you feel the silence pressing down on you. And then there are moments where it swells and builds and washes over you in a way that makes it almost impossible to hold your emotions together. And the way the music interacts with what you are seeing on screen, the way it rises exactly when it needs to and pulls back exactly when it needs to, shows a level of craft and intentionality that tells you everything about how seriously everyone involved in this season has taken their responsibility to tell this story the right way. There are actors who prepare for a role. They read the script, they study the character, they do their research, and they deliver a performance. And that is completely valid, and that takes real skill and real talent. But then there are actors who do something entirely different. There are actors who do not just prepare for a role, but who actually live inside it, who carry the weight of the character with them not just on set, but everywhere they go, who allow the story to change them from the inside out. And Jonathan Roumie is without any question one of those actors. And everything he has said since finishing the filming of Season 6 makes it absolutely clear that what he went through to bring this season to life was something far beyond what most people will ever experience in their careers or in their lives. Jonathan has said in interview after interview since filming wrapped on September 17th that Season 6 was one of the hardest things he has ever done. And I want to be very careful here, because I do not want to just repeat those words without really sitting with what they mean. Because Jonathan is not someone who talks about difficulty for attention or for dramatic effect. He is someone who is genuinely thoughtful and measured in the way he speaks about his work and his faith. So when he says that this season pushed him to one of the hardest periods of his life, you have to take that seriously. You have to understand that what he is describing is not just physical exhaustion from a demanding shoot, although that was certainly part of it. What he is describing is something much deeper than that, something that touched him at a level that goes far beyond the professional. Think about what Jonathan was asked to do for this season. He was asked to portray a man being betrayed by someone he loved. being arrested in the middle of the night, being dragged before one powerful figure after another, being questioned, mocked, struck, humiliated, being dressed in a royal robe as a joke, having a crowd scream for his execution, being flogged, being crowned with thorns, and through all of it, remaining silent, remaining calm, remaining completely surrendered to something larger than himself. And to do all of that convincingly, to make an audience feel all of that in a way that is genuine and not performative, you cannot just act it. You have to find it somewhere real inside yourself. And Jonathan has made it clear that that is exactly what he did. And the cost of that was significant. What is so remarkable about what Jonathan has shared is the way he found his way through those difficult periods. Because when you are an actor carrying that kind of weight every single day on set, you need something to hold on to. You need something that keeps you grounded and keeps you moving forward even when everything inside you wants to stop. And for Jonathan, that thing was Jesus himself. He has talked about how in the moments when the filming became almost too much to bear, he would ask himself how Jesus would think in this situation. What would Jesus do? How would Jesus feel? And rather than pulling him deeper into darkness, that practice actually lifted him. It strengthened him. It gave him a way to connect with the character, not just as a performance, but as a genuine spiritual experience. And that is something that I find deeply moving, because it means that the suffering Jonathan went through during filming was not wasted. It was transformed into something meaningful. And we are going to feel that transformation in every single scene of this season. There is something else Jonathan has talked about that I think is really important to understand before we watch this season, and that is the physical reality of what they filmed. Because when you watch a scene in a film or a television show, you are watching the finished product. You are watching the lighting and the editing and the music all working together to create an experience. But behind that finished product, there are hours and days and weeks of actually doing the thing, of actually standing in the cold, of actually wearing the costume, of actually being in the physical position that the scene requires. And for a season that involves the kind of content Season 6 involves, that physical reality is something that accumulates over time in a way that takes a real toll on the body and the mind. And Jonathan has been honest about that toll. He has not tried to minimize it or dismiss it, and that honesty makes everything he has said about his faith and his gratitude and his love for this project even more meaningful, because it comes from a place of having genuinely paid a price to bring this story to life. I also want to talk about what the rest of the cast and crew have said about this season. Because Jonathan is not the only one who has described filming Season 6 as a uniquely intense and deeply affecting experience. Dallas Jenkins has spoken about the atmosphere on set during the filming of these scenes in a way that tells you everything about how seriously everyone took their responsibility. He has described moments where the entire crew was in tears, where people who have spent years working in film and television, who have seen everything, who are professionals in every sense of the word, were standing behind their cameras completely overcome by what they were witnessing. And that tells you something extraordinary about what Jonathan was bringing to these scenes. Because it is one thing to move an audience who is watching a finished film in the comfort of their own home. It is something entirely different to move the people who are standing right there watching it happen in real time, who can see the cameras and the lights and all the machinery of filmmaking, and who are still unable to hold themselves together. There have also been reports from people on set about the silence that would fall after particularly difficult scenes were filmed. That is not something you often hear about. Usually when a difficult scene is wrapped, there's a sense of relief. People exhale. They break from the intensity. They come back to themselves. But there were scenes in Season 6 where after Dallas called cut, nobody moved for a long moment. Nobody spoke. And that silence was not awkward or uncomfortable. It was the silence of people who had just witnessed something that they needed a moment to process. And I think when we finally watch those scenes ourselves, we are going to understand exactly what that silence felt like. Because there are moments in this story that do not leave you quickly. There are moments that stay with you for a long time after the screen goes dark. And Season 6 is going to be full of them. What all of this tells me, and what I really want you to take with you as we continue this breakdown, is that Season 6 is not just a season of television. It is not just the next chapter in a series that we all love. It is something that the people who made it clearly poured everything they had into. Every ounce of faith, every ounce of talent, every ounce of emotional courage. And that kind of investment does not go unnoticed on screen. You can feel it. You can feel it in the trailer already. You can feel it in every word Jonathan and Dallas and the rest of the cast have spoken about this season. And when we finally sit down to watch it, I genuinely believe that we are going to be watching something that stays with us for the rest of our lives. Not because of the production value, although that is clearly extraordinary, but because of the truth that is being carried inside every single frame. And that truth, the truth of what Jesus went through and why he chose to go through it, is something that no amount of filmmaking craft can manufacture. It has to be felt. And Jonathan felt it. And now, he is going to help us feel it too.